Now, earlier this summer, Hannah Dingley became the first woman to lead an elite English men's football team when she took interim charge of Forest Green Rovers. Since, she's reverted to her role as academy manager at the club, but she's decided to break away from those responsibilities to join us here in the Sky Sports News studio. It's an absolute pleasure to speak to you, Hannah. I mean, it's been a bit of an interesting time, hasn't it? I can imagine that at the time it must have been a bit of a whirlwind when you were appointed as the manager of the senior men's first team. How was that experience, and how would it compare to what you'd done before in the academy? Was there anything that surprised you at all?
No, I think obviously, the players are a bit better, in terms of the sessions, had to be a bit sharper, a few less maybe conditions that you put on with the normal players, but ultimately they're players. And, they want good quality training sessions, they want clear information, clear instructions to what they want to do every game. And then you just prepare for a season. I think that's the thing that we sort of forget, when there was all the sort of frenzy around it all. Ultimately, our job was to prepare them as best we could for the incoming new head coach, for the start of the season, because, ultimately, if they hadn't done that, they're sort of treading water in terms of the start of the League Two campaign.
Did you feel like you were treated in any way differently because you're a woman, or did it feel like business as usual for you?
Not from the players, but again, I think that's normal. So obviously, I've been at the club for almost 5 years, going into my 5th season. So the players are used to me being around the place. We have bounce games, reserve games. So internally, it didn't seem to be the big deal that it was externally. And I think my biggest sort of concern was that sort of reflection on the players. So as I say, you step into that job and you want to do a good job. And I was really keen to sort of, take away all the sort of noise from outside so that we could concentrate on what our job, and actually, as I say, getting ready for the season.
I mean, you said it was a bigger deal for perhaps us in the media than it was for you moving into this role. But it was still making history, I guess, the first person to be appointed at this level in this role. Obviously, there are going to be a few people who look at this cynically, right, Hannah? And they'll kind of go, come on, just a PR stunt. You want some positive news, especially with a club that's gone down to League Two. What would be your reaction to that?
I think it's really frustrating because, I hadn't just rocked up on, on that day and said, right, I'm going to manage a men's team today. I've not done any of this before. I've had a lot of experience. I've done the hard yards in terms of, coaching men's non-league teams, Sheffield Dynamo, Gresley Rovers, Leicester Nirvana, working in academy systems. I've worked in Notts County, Burton Albion, so I didn't just turn up that day and Dale go, I don't know what, she'd be good, let's put her in. This was, the culmination of a lot of hard work to get there. So it's obviously quite frustrating when it's sort of seen as that tokenistic, because you think, rightly so, I was the most senior person at the club to take on that role. If it was, this happens up and down the country at different clubs. I was going to say,
when you look at someone, say, like Ryan Mason taking over from Christian Cellini or Antonio Conte, it's a similar kind of step up, and not as much is made of that because he's a bloke and the others are blokes. But this was obviously, the tone of it seemed a bit different. But I'm wondering, it was a relatively short stint, wasn't it? Did you feel like, I would have liked to do this for a bit longer, or just getting my feet under the table, as it were? Of
course, and again, as I say, you probably speak to anybody, who's had the pleasure of stepping up from that academy environment into the first team environment. I'm sure, you always want to have it, more of it. But that's the job, and as I say, I don't see the difference from what happens up and down the countries, from when academy staff step up and take an interim period. And, remembering the time of year we were, it was really important to get somebody in place. So, as I say, that was so we can start the season, positively. So, I didn't see any sort of difference.
We'll come to Forest Green's current season in a moment. Obviously, it hasn't been the ideal start. There is a potential here that you could be called again, Hannah, because if they decide that they want to make another change, is it something that you'd like to do again? Would you answer the call if it came from Dale once more?
Oh, definitely. And I've said it before, I'm there to try and do the best for the football club. And that's what I'm employed to do, develop young players to hopefully get into the first team and add value to the first team playing squad. And if I were to give him the opportunity, of course I'd want to step in. But Dave is doing a fantastic job. OK, results haven't quite gone the way we would want them to go. But you can see the starts of a plan of the way we want to set up, the way we're going to play, the types of players we want to develop and sort of players that we want to recruit. And it's not a short-term project. It's not, you can't snap your fingers and these things happen. Obviously there's a lot of a hangover from last season's relegation. We found that when we sort of took over for that period, there's still be some sort of resonance of that sort of bruising, I suppose, of the tough season from the season before. So there's lots of things to consider. But, you know, I think Dave is going to do a really good job, and the future's looking bright at Forest Green.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always fascinated by, you know, kind of things like the pathway, right, for women to move into football, be it the women's game, the men's game. And obviously there seems to be more of an established pathway in women's football for women, less so for women's football, for women in men's football. What sort of resources have you got? What sort of backing have you got? What more do you need for not just you but others to sort of tread the same path?
Well, I think the game's changing. It's really interesting. Last week I spoke at a grassroots women's coaches conference, and there was you know, some other practitioners who work at you know, men's clubs, so female practitioners in fitness coaching or in sort of neuroscience that were presenting, and we all had similar experiences that at the time we were probably the only female on a coaching course or the only female on that pathway, but yet there was 250 female coaches in that room, 250 coaches who, you know, either step into the female game or into the male game, and they need to know that their pathway could be, as I say, either, and either way they can add value to the game.
Do you feel that we're at a tipping point here, especially with what happened with the Lionesses? We need to really use this moment to not just promote for women playing football, but women coaching football, women officiating football. Are we at that tipping point, do you think, Hannah?
Yeah, and as I say, I think there's been loads of positive developments around the women's game over the last few years. You know, we talk about obviously our recent success in the World Cup, but obviously the Euros, but before that, and before that, a lot of hard work's gone into it, and I don't think we can sort of forget that's what's been gone before. You know, a lot of female coaches and female players, you know, have sort of put the groundwork in. You know, there's still times where you know, the women's team were having to wash their own kit, or the staff were washing the kit before they went and played, you know, and they weren't full time, so they're having to do other jobs. So the whole game is growing, and that grows the profile, I think, of all female sort of, as I say, practitioners, be it coaches, be it players, be it S&C coaches, physiotherapists, administrators, to show that there is a role in football for them.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask you about Sarina Wiegman briefly. The FA Chief Executive, Mark Bullingham, has suggested that she could even succeed Gareth Southgate as a manager of the England men's team. What level can you see Sarina at if she were to enter the men's game? Do you agree with that assertion?
She's a fantastic coach, fantastic manager, and, you know, whatever her path will be. But let's not discredit the women's game.
Of course. Because
this is what is time, you know, and I'm sure Emma Hayes says similar things. You know, she's working at Chelsea in Champions League with senior international players, and we're talking about her going to take a job at, you know, in a League Two club. And we're saying, oh, well, you know, why would you not want to do that? Well, you know, understand that the women's game has its own credit. And it's got
growth, and it's got attention.
So are we saying that leaving the women's team to go in the men's game would be a promotion? Because I'm not sure we would, you know, she would see it that way. So I think we've got to maybe change the way that we look at things. Yeah.
Just finally, you mentioned Forest Green this season. Obviously, Troy Deeney now as player manager. Have you had any dealings with him? What's he like to work with?
Yeah, Troy's been in and around training, and he's, you know, he's a great human being and great to have around the club. Really imparts some great knowledge to the young players. You know, really sort of encompassing other players and, you know, putting arm around shoulders and helping them. And I can't see him being anything but a positive influence on the squad, you know, on the team moving forward. Yeah,
and I'm sure that, you know, you yourself will be part of his, you know, his trusted circle, and that you can help him deliver what he wants to deliver at Forest Green.
Yeah, and he's going to help us. You know, what a great role model to come in and speak to the young players. What a great role model to, you know, to support us from both ways. So, you know the club. It's a small club, but it's a tight club. Yeah. And that's what we like about it, because, you know, he'll learn from us, we'll learn from them, we'll support each other, and we all want to drive in the same direction, and because we've ultimately all got the same goal. Yeah, fantastic. Well, listen, hopefully things pick up with Forest Green Rovers back in League Two. Good luck for the rest of the season, and good luck as well with your role in the academy. Thank you so much for coming in, Hannah. Thank you very much. Cheers.